Santa is going to destroy you!
Invader Zim, 2001 to 2006. There's nothing that grabs attention quite like a cancelled show, especially one that never deserved to be cancelled. Invader Zim, which aired from 2001, is one of those cult classics that made its mark on Nickelodeon right at the turn of the century. The show was created by comic book writer and cartoonist Jonan Vasquez, and it stands out because of its quirky, dark humour combined with some unexpectedly profound existential themes. Sadly, the show got cancelled in 2002, mainly because of low ratings and high production costs. Still, the fan base has always stayed strong, and in 2006, a handful of episodes were released again. So, whether you grew up enjoying Zim and Dib's antics on Nickelodeon, or you're just discovering them now, this video will bring you content worth reliving. Also, before we begin our elaborate exploration of the lore and narrative of the show, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more of this cartoon awesomeness.
Leave me alone! I just want to go home and be all normal!
Season 1, 2001 to 2002. Episode 1. The Nightmare Begins. The Urkans, a race of conquest-driven aliens, have one ultimate goal: universal domination. At the helm of their vast empire stand their towering leaders, almighty tallest red and purple. They have just begun the highly anticipated Great Assigning, where they handpick elite invaders to embark on missions for Operation Impending Doom 2. The grand event is taking place on the Convention Hall planet, Conventia. Everything is going smoothly until a most unwelcome guest arrives. Zim Infamous, Reckless, and the most troublesome Urkan to ever exist. Zim was banished long ago after single-handedly derailing Operation Impending Doom by accidentally obliterating his own comrades. For his crimes, he was sentenced to a life of servitude on the miserable food court planet, Foodcourtia. But when news of a new operation reaches his ears, Zim quits his exile and storms into the Great Assigning, demanding a mission of his own. The tallest are less than thrilled. They know exactly what kind of chaos follows Zim wherever he goes. Desperate to get rid of him, they hastily assign him to a distant, insignificant planet, one so far removed from the Empire that it's of no interest to the Urkans whatsoever. That planet is Earth. With his new assignment, Zim is granted a SIR unit, a robotic assistant meant to aid him in his conquest. However, in a final act of dismissal, the tallest give him a defective model cobbled together from scrap parts. Thus, Gur is born, a hyperactive, erratic little robot with a penchant for nonsense and junk food. Undeterred, Zim sets off toward his so-called mission, blissfully unaware that an Earth child has tuned into the Urkan transmission. That child, a paranormal enthusiast named Dib, has now made it his personal mission to expose the alien invader. 6 months later, Zim finally arrives on Earth. Wasting no time, he sets up his base of operations in the middle of a human neighborhood. Using advanced Urkan technology, he sketches out the blueprint of a normal human house onto a capsule, which promptly drills into the ground and constructs an elaborate underground lair beneath it. The noise alone is enough to wake the entire neighborhood, but Zim pays no mind. He has a planet to conquer. To gather intelligence on the weak, unsuspecting humans, he decides to infiltrate their institutions of learning, disguising himself as a human child, a feeble yet effective disguise, and fitting Gar with a crude dog costume. Zim enrolls in the local school. Surprisingly, none of the students or teachers question his bizarre appearance. None except Dib. Dib, a self-proclaimed expert on the paranormal, immediately recognizes Zim for what he is, an alien, but no one believes him. Determined to prove himself right, Dib devises a plan to capture Zim using alien sleep cuffs. A chaotic chase ensues, culminating in Zim calling upon Gur to extract him. Unfortunately, Gur leaves a trail of smoke, allowing Dib to follow them straight to Zim's home. Dib confronts him outside, vowing to expose the truth. But before he can act, Zim's robotic gnomes spring into action, destroying Dib's cuffs. Frustrated but undeterred, Dib retreats, promising that this isn't over. Meanwhile, Zim, dusting himself off, remains unconcerned. Later, he contacts the almighty tallest, boasting about his progress, and confidently declaring that he will conquer Earth long before the Urkan armada arrives. The tallest, watching him from afar, exchange a weary glance, their expressions laced with dread. Zim is still alive, and that can only mean trouble. Episode 2, Bestest Friend, NanoZim. Part 1, Bestest Friend. One day at lunch, Zim tunes in on some gossip. Jessica, one of his classmates, was chatting with her friends at a nearby table. She casually remarks that having no friends is so inhuman, and the comment strikes a nerve. Panic coils in Zim's chest. What if his loneliness exposes his true identity? If humans discover he's an alien, he'll be dragged off by human scientists, poked and prodded until there's nothing left. He can't risk it. Desperate to blend in, he approaches the so-called rejects table and bluntly asks which of them wants to be his best friend. After a few awkward conversations, he narrows it down to a handful of kids and subjects them to a series of absurd friendship tests. He tests their absorbency by pouring water over their heads, their electroconductivity by handing them electrified objects, and then announces a final test involving a beaver and a toy taxi. Talk about standing out. When all is said and done, Zim declares a red-haired kid named Keith the victor and officially dubs him his best friend. But after a bizarre montage of forced friendship, Zim decides he no longer needs Keith's companionship. However, Keith refuses to take the hint, shadowing Zim wherever he goes. Finally, when Zim overhears Keith planning a surprise party for him, he takes drastic action. Zim constructs a gift for Keith, one that removes his eyes and replaces them with artificial, hypnotic ones. Under Zim's control, Keith now sees a territorial squirrel as Zim himself. Funnily, the fateful Find a Best Friend adventure ends with Keith tumbling off a rooftop and getting caught in a massive explosion.
Human doesn't know when to quit. I'll finish with the rest of your brain after I deal with your chunky.
Episode 2, Bestest Friend and NanoZim. Forgetfulness is risky, and when Zim's robotic assistant slips up one night, Dib seizes the opportunity. He sneaks inside, snaps a photo of Zim without his disguise, and escapes before the alien can catch him. Back home, Dib slides the precious picture onto a floppy disk, seals it in an envelope, and prepares to send it off to mysterious mysteries of strange mystery. His shot at proving aliens are real, but Zim has other plans. He shrinks himself to microscopic size, boarding a nanoship designed to infiltrate Dibs's body. Once inside, he hijacks Dibs's nervous system, forcing him to crush the floppy disk in his own hands. Quite crafty, isn't he? Dib thinks so too, and he snaps at Zim for his nice try as he struggles to regain control. Apparently, Dib made a backup disk, and it's hidden somewhere Zim can never reach. Furious, Zim redirects his ship toward Dib's brain, determined to wipe his memory and eliminate all evidence of the disk's whereabouts. Unbeknownst to them, Professor Membrane has been developing a microscopic submarine, controlled like a video game. Desperate, Dib climbs into the machine, his entire body a battlefield, as Zim's influence sends him twitching and stumbling around the room. Suddenly, Gaz walks in, eyes narrowing at Dib's wild movements. She simply thinks he is playing some weird game. Dib begins to deny it, but another spasm cuts him off. Gaz smirks, and before Dib can protest, Gaz takes control. To her, it's just another boss fight, and she's a pro. With precision and skill, she quickly eliminates Zim's nanoship, even leaving her name on a high-score screen before walking away. Bored, Dib ends the chaotic battle the only way he can, by literally flushing Zim out of his system.
We should go home now.
Don't tell me what to do, young man. You go to your room.
Episode 3, Parent-Teacher Night and Walk of Doom. Part 1, Parent-Teacher Night. After a long day at Earth School dragged to a close, and as the bell rang, Ms. Bitters's raspy voice cut through the classroom like a rusty saw blade. She promptly reminded them about the Parent-Teacher Night. Her gaze lingered ominously over Zim, for a second too long, sending a shiver down his spine. Parents. Of course, the Earth children had them, fleshy, protective creatures, assigned to care for them. But Zim? No. The Urkans didn't have parents, not really. They were grown from gene banks, their knowledge implanted directly into their packs. His so-called parents were nothing but robotic puppets, barely passable imitations of real humans, and they certainly weren't prepared for such a critical test. As panic bubbled in his chest, Zim rushed home to the base, yanking the robo-parents from their stasis chambers and strapping them into chairs. They needed training, and fast. With trembling fingers, he switched on the Proper Earth Parenting program, a dull, monotonous broadcast featuring wholesome family interactions and arbitrary displays of affection. But of course, Gur had other plans. The little robot bounced around the room before slamming his tiny metal fist down on the remote, swapping the programming for chaotic, violent nonsense. Zim screeched in frustration, but the damage was done. That night, in the school's grimy cafeteria, Zim's nerves were frayed. Dib was there, clutching some kind of communication device, his father too busy with his own scientific pursuits to show up in person. The boy tried, as usual, to expose Zim's alien nature, only for Professor Membrane's voice on the screen to completely misinterpret his meaning. Meanwhile, Zim's robo-parents behaved well enough at first, but their programming, tainted by Gur's interference, soon malfunctioned. They cackled, gibbered, and wreaked havoc through the cafeteria, their bizarre behaviour going unnoticed by everyone except Dib. His frustration reached a boiling point, and in one last desperate act, he hurled his punch to the floor in rage. As chaos unfolded, Zim slipped away, hauling his malfunctioning robo-parents to the exit. The three of them soared off into the night sky, their escape successful. Back in the school, all Dib got for his trouble was the echo of mocking laughter ringing in his ears. Part 2. Walk of Doom. Zim had finally had enough of Gur's chaotic incompetence. Fed up, he upgraded Gur's guidance technology and ran a few tests. Everything seemed promising, so Zim decided to take Gur into the city to see if his new guidance chip could safely get them back to the base. But of course, Gur had other priorities. Instead of using the upgraded guidance chip, Gur left it at home to make room for a cupcake. So Zim and Gur were left wandering the city with only their wits to guide them. Unfortunately, their wits were lacking. Zim's first plan? A makeshift compass he crafted from street litter. It failed spectacularly. Plan 2, board a bus, but they were quickly kicked off for not having any money. Zim then tried to stare directly at the sun, confident he could figure out which way was west. Instead, his contacts began to bubble and fry, leaving him temporarily blind, though eventually his vision returned. When a passerby told him to get a job under the assumption he was homeless, Zim took it literally. Soon enough, he and Gur were dancing wildly in the park, earning enough cash to fill a small jar. Even a robber, wearing an oddly similar outfit to Zim's, tossed them some loose change. But when they finally had enough money for the bus, Zim couldn't stand the noise and chaos. They were off again before the ride even started. Frustrated but stubborn, Zim's next plan was to find a tall building and use his ocular implants to spot their neighbourhood. But as they approached a recently robbed bank, the police mistook Zim for the culprit. After a chaotic rooftop chase, Zim and Gur narrowly escaped, with Gur running out of fuel way too quickly. Apparently, he dumped his reserves to make room for tuna. Having exhausted every ridiculous option, Zim finally gave in and hailed a taxi. But as fate would have it, the taxi only left them even more adrift.
No, Gur, no!
Episode 4, Germs and Dark Harvest. Part 1, Germs. As Zim and Gur lounge on the couch, watching the climax of Intestines of War, the humans have discovered the aliens' weakness, germs. Armed with this knowledge, they begin restoring peace to Earth. As the credits roll, Zim and Gur cackle maniacally at the weakness of some race being overtaken by a germ. Amused by the thought, Zim heads to his underground lab, eager to test his new micro-goggles, which boast the power of germ vision. At first, his confidence is unshakable, but the moment he sees the squirming, wriggling germs coating every surface, his bravado shatters. Trembling in pure terror, he frantically orders the full version of the goggles from Kalnoia. The package arrives swiftly, and with it, Zim's descent into full-blown germophobia. His world becomes a nightmare of bacterial invasions. Armed with disinfectant and cleaning tools, he scrubs every inch of his base while Gur gleefully parades around with a muddy pig. At last, Zim inhales deeply, savouring his pristine, sanitized lair. His victory is short-lived. A single germ crawls from a kitchen crack. Screeching, he obliterates it. His celebration is cut off by Gur charging inside, tracking dirt and germs everywhere. Zim's patience snaps. Desperate for cleanliness, he drags Gur outside, shoves him back into his dog suit, and ties him to a tree. He tries to compose himself, reminding himself of his mission. Calling the tallest for guidance, he attempts to give a progress report, only to be distracted by the creeping infestation of germs. His broadcast ends with maniacal laughter and a pledge to destroy all germs, leaving the tallest shaken. Running low on disinfectant, Zim reluctantly retrieves Gur to head to the store. By the time they arrive, it's night. Zim's paranoia only worsens when Gur dashes into a filthy McMeaty's restaurant. Chasing Gur inside, Zim discovers something incredible. The burgers are completely germ-free. The burger lord explains the meat is made from recycled napkins. To Zim, it's a revelation. The next day, Zim strides into school covered in meat, confidently greeting his classmates, oblivious to their horrified stares. Part 2. Dark Harvest. At school, Dib eagerly tests his brand new X-scope on Zim, expecting something weird, but not this weird. Zim's organs are nothing like human ones. The discovery leaves Dib both horrified and exhilarated. Later, in Ms. Bitters's grim classroom, Zim starts acting strange. Dib's eyes gleam with the possibility of exposure. The nurse's office looms near, and Dib taunts Zim, gleefully predicting that the nurse will uncover his alien nature. On his way to the nurse's office, Zim stumbles upon a biology class teaching human anatomy. Fascinated, he decides the only way to appear more human is to collect human organs. His first victim is a hapless hall monitor who dares question his whereabouts. Meanwhile, Dib comes up with a ridiculous plan to get sent to the nurse's office, jamming a pencil up his nose and insisting it's stuck in his brain. Ms. Bitters begrudgingly allows him to leave, but hands him the auxiliary hall pass, a bulky radiator. When Dib arrives, Zim is already gone. Instead, the hall monitor sits trembling. Suspicious, Dib uses his X-scope and finds Zim has replaced the poor kid's organ with a hall pass. Dib soon realizes Zim is rampaging through the school, using a device from his pack to harvest organs and replace them with random objects. Most kids are left horrified, except Gaz, who seems unbothered by her game slave now glowing from her midsection. Teaming up with Talk Smacky, the only other unscathed kid, Dib tries to protect him, but in a single distracted moment, Talk vanishes, leaving Dib as the final target. Zim's relentless pursuit drives Dib to the school's darkest corners. Inevitably, Zim catches him and replaces one of Dib's organs with a device that emits a mooing sound whenever he breathes. Zim's ruse works. The nurse declares him just as healthy as any normal person with enough organs. Dib, however, is declared anything but human. As a fun twist to the caper, his condition becomes news headlines soon enough.
Finally! I need your help. I've been captured!
Episode 5. Attack of the Saucer Morons and the Wettening. Part 1. Attack of the Saucer Morons. Zim decides to test Earth's defences, taking his Voot cruiser for a spin to monitor local police activity. But his plans go awry when a stray bumblebee smashes into his view screen, sending him spiralling down into a park. Frustrated and stranded, Zim calls for Gur, but the little robot is nowhere to be found. Annoyed, Zim trudges home, vowing to return for the ship the next day with a recovery vehicle disguised as a giant floating pig. But when he finally returns, he finds a group of alien enthusiasts known as the Children of the Bright and Shining Saucer, or the Saucer Morons, already swarming around his ship like it's their holy relic. Desperate to reclaim his Voot, Zim joins their ranks, pretending to be a fellow worshipper. Just as he's endured their ridiculous initiation rituals, his pig vehicle is discovered and promptly declared another divine artifact. Losing patience with subtlety, Zim tries brute force to reclaim his ship, but accidentally reveals himself as an alien. The Saucer Morons capture him, locking him in a tent to worship him as some celestial being. But Zim's paranoia outweighs their devotion. He's convinced they'll dissect him any minute In a panic, he calls for Gur again. This time, Gur arrives, hilariously disguised as a government agent piloting a clunky Super Sentai-style robot suit. He convinces the saucer morons that Zim, the ship, and the pig are all experimental government aircraft. They almost buy it, until Gur falls out of the suit. Chaos erupts, and the two narrowly escape on the pig, only to crash into another alien convention, thanks to that same menacing bee. Part 2. The Wettening. On a gloomy rainy day, Zim stared out the window of his school with unblinking curiosity. Rain was a phenomenon entirely foreign to him. Back on Urk, such weather simply didn't exist. The rhythmic splatter against the glass fascinated and unsettled him. Caution crept into his posture, his antenna twitching at every drop's impact. Dib, ever vigilant, noticed Zim's hesitation and seized the opportunity to observe. His suspicions proved correct when Zim, determined to confront this unknown element, stepped into the rain. What began as defiance crumbled within seconds. The polluted downpour scalded his skin like acid, its touch cruel and unrelenting. Zim retreated with a strangled, pained motion, his arrogance visibly shaken. Over the weekend, the revelation of Zim's vulnerability consumed Dib's thoughts. The idea of exploiting such a devastating weakness was irresistible. Plans were drawn, contraptions assembled, and victory felt within reach. Meanwhile, Zim worked tirelessly to counter the newfound threat. Through methodical testing of substances scraped from the dingy walls of school, he discovered that a peculiar paste, once applied as a protective coating, nullified the water's painful effects. His preparations complete, Zim awaited their inevitable confrontation. On Monday, the showdown commenced. Dib arrived armed with a water balloon launcher, confidence blazing in his eyes, but Zim merely stood there, motionless, trembling as if paralyzed by fear. Dib's assault began, but the first balloon sailed straight through Zim, the truth revealed in a flicker of static. It was only a hologram. High above the planet's surface, Zim hovered in orbit aboard a massive space station. His revenge was swift and merciless. The city's water supply was drained and redirected into a single, monstrous water balloon. Without hesitation, he released it, flooding the city below and obliterating his own home in the process. But Zim felt no remorse. His mission complete, he descended back into his base, only to find himself once again trapped in the endlessly problematic toilet elevator. Episode 6, Career Day and Battle Dib. Part 1, Career Day. For the Career Day event, Ms. Bitters decided to pick the perfect mentors using a clunky aptitude test machine. Dib is desperate to be paired with a paranormal investigator, while Zim, with his usual arrogance, aims for something grander. But things go terribly wrong. Dib ends up with Bill, a conspiracy-obsessed paranormal investigator with more passion than skill, while Zim is sentenced to a day working at the greasy fast food nightmare known as MacMeaties. Furious but determined, Zim misinterprets the 8 billion served sign, assuming the corporation's leaders must be the rulers of Earth. Certain that climbing the MacMeaties ladder will somehow make him lord of all humans, Zim tackles the role with disturbing enthusiasm. Meanwhile, the galactic equinox is approaching, a rare cosmic event that forces any alien away from their home planet to endure a hideous, itchy molting process. And Zim isn't spared. Dib notices Zim's neck developing a grotesque acne-like rash, clear evidence of his alien nature. But Bill is more interested in a crop circle supposedly made by an alien-controlled cow. As Dib's frustration boils over, he bitterly mentions the ridiculous Count Cocofang. This bizarre name strikes a nerve. Bill has apparently been hunting the cereal box mascot for years, convinced he's a real vampire. At last, Dib has leverage. Dragging Bill to MacMeaties just before 5 p.m, Dib hopes to catch Zim's inevitable meltdown. But Zim, obsessed with his fake corporate ambitions, refuses to leave before the shift ends, desperate to earn his promotion. The clock strikes 5, and Zim's body betrays him. The violent molting erupts, triggering chaos in the restaurant. But Bill is too busy trying to stake a man in a Count Cocofang costume to notice anything else. The man escapes, leaving Dib furious and calling Bill a complete jerk. Zim, meanwhile, is fired for wrecking the restaurant. As the shift captain bans him from ever returning, Zim limps away, his delusions of fast food power thoroughly shattered. Part 2. Battle Dib. For the first time ever, Dib gets to show off his presentation to the Swollen Eyeball Network. Apparently, he's convinced it'll be the day he puts a stop to Zim's schemes for good. The only problem? He needs his dad's signature on a permission slip, and Professor Membrane is too busy filming his TV show to even glance his way. Desperate, Dib heads to the studio, only to be stopped by a skeptical security guard who assumes he's just another crazed fan. Things only get worse when Gaz shows up, her fury ignited by Dib swiping the last slice of pizza before bolting out the door. Rather than helping him, she convinces the guard that Dib really is an obsessive fan. Dib is thrown into the studio's grueling audience entry exam, which includes a written test and a combat round against a burly opponent named Shunk. They strike a deal to tie their match so both can see Professor Membrane, but Gaz, ever the chaotic sibling, tricks Shunk into thinking Dib insulted his head. Furious, Shunk pummels Dib in the final round and he's promptly dragged outside. Just as he's about to be tossed out, Dib literally bumps into Professor Membrane. Unfortunately, his dad doesn't recognize him as his own son, just another eager fan. Oblivious, the professor signs the permission slip, thinking it's an autograph. Dib is thrilled, but his triumph is short-lived when he realizes he left his entire hard work behind. Episode 7. Planet Jackers and Rise of the Zit Boy. Part 1. Planet Jackers. Zim peered through his massive telescope, frustration mounting as he tracked the progress of the other Urkan invaders. To his dismay, they were all leaps and bounds ahead of him in their planetary conquests. Suddenly, his view was blocked by harsh interference. He scowled, instantly blaming Gur for tampering with the equipment. But for once, Gur was innocent, leaving Zim more than a little rattled. Before he could ponder the mystery further, a violent quake shook the lab, sending his precious telescope crashing to the floor in a mess of shattered glass and twisted metal. Desperate to continue his surveillance, Zim stormed out to the city hilltop, only for Gur to cheerfully suggest using Dib's backyard telescope. The mere thought made his skin crawl, but with few options, Zim swallowed his pride and marched to Dib's house. Naturally, Dib refused, slamming the door in his face. Furious but undeterred, Zim returned to his ship, determined to investigate on his own. It wasn't long before he discovered the horrifying truth. Earth and its moon had been captured by the Planet Jackers, a brutal alien race that hurled stolen planets into their dying sun to keep their world alive. They'd encased Earth in a metal shell, projecting a false sky to keep the humans oblivious. Outraged that someone else dared claim his planet, Zim devised a plan. He tried diplomacy first, citing an Urkan Planet Jacker treaty, but the Jackers laughed in his face. Earth was unmarked and worthless. With words failing, Zim attacked, only to be swiftly overpowered. Desperation fueled his final gambit, blasting through the shell and creating enough chaos to force the Planet Jackers to flee. When they discarded the empty shell into their sun, Zim cackled triumphantly.
Julio is my friend.
Here's a pimple! Nothing more than a...
Part 2. Rise of the Zit Boy. Zim was deep in his lab when a sudden alarm pierced the silence. Frowning, he rushed upstairs, only to find a ridiculously large ceramic squirrel sitting on his front lawn. It took him all of 3 seconds to realize it was Dib in disguise. Dib sneered how Zim's security system isn't up to the mark, as it should, triumphant even in his failure. Zim naturally denies it, but the universe has a cruel sense of humor. Right then, a pizza delivery guy strolled right past him, completely undeterred, and handed Gur a pizza. As Zim stormed back into the house, grumbling about potential breaches, Gur tore into the pizza like a wild animal. The sight, and smell, was enough to turn Zim's stomach. Gur threw himself at Zim in a greasy hug, smearing cheese and sauce all over him. Disgusted, Zim shoved him away and demanded cleansing chalk, what humans apparently called soap. Gur returned with a bar of soap, but the unmistakable scent of bacon wafted from it. Just when Zim thought things couldn't get worse, Gur pointed out the red bump forming on his cheek. Gur yelped, producing a tube of acne blast from who knew where before proceeding to eat it. Zim applied the cream, but instead of shrinking, the blemish swelled to grotesque proportions, and somehow Gur was swimming inside it. Worse, the little robot had drawn a face on it, delighted by its hypnotic power. Zim, however, saw potential. At school the next day, he tested his theory. Sure enough, the students fell under the pimple's sway, all but Gaz, who kept reading, and a few others who lingered in the hallway, uninterested. Dib tried to intervene but was quickly overpowered, yet Zim's victory was fleeting. The pimple exploded, coating the classroom in disgusting goo. As Zim left, smirking and promising to upgrade his defences, Miss Bitters handed Dib a third of a sponge and ordered him to clean the mess. The only thing worse than defeat, Dib realised, was clean-up duty.
Don't think you understand how serious this is! Tacos are not worth ruining the mission!
Episode 8, Invasion of the Idiot Dog Brain and Bad Rubber Piggy. Part 1, Invasion of the Idiot Dog Brain. Zim's headquarters was having security problems, of course, right in the middle of him delivering a crucial report to the almighty Tallest. Frustrated but determined to fix the issue quickly, Zim decided to upgrade the security system himself. He put Gur in charge of making sure nothing went wrong while he replaced the computer's AI. Predictably, Gur got distracted. While trying to retrieve his precious rubber moose toy, the little robot accidentally triggered a total shutdown of the base, along with himself. But Zim soon made a horrifying discovery. Gur's brain had been uploaded into the central hub of the house, putting him in complete control over all its systems. Naturally, Gur did not put this power to good use. Things went from bad to disastrous when the robot developed an uncontrollable craving for tacos and burritos. Instead of resolving the situation, Gur detached his new body from the base, transforming the house into a giant, lumbering quadrupedal beast. The towering mechanical creature then proceeded to rampage through the city on a mission to reach the holy grail of junk food, Crazy Taco. Zim's attempts to reason with Gur were useless, so he resorted to a different tactic. After buying a pile of tacos from Crazy Taco, Zim dangled them as bait, promising Gur his beloved tacos only if he returned to the base. The plan worked, though not without Gur leaving a path of destruction all the way home. Once the house reconnected with the base, Gur reluctantly agreed to have his mind transferred back to his old body. After all, his house form lacked a mouth, something absolutely essential for enjoying tacos. With everything finally restored to normal, Zim contacted the Tallest to deliver his report, proudly declaring that things were even more normal now than ever before. But that is so far from the truth.
My whole life has been a miserable, pig-filled ordeal because of you!
Part 2, Bad Rubber Piggy. After much toiling around, Zim ultimately completes one of his brilliant inventions, a space-time object transfer gadget. His grand plan, to send a giant robot back in time to eliminate Dib once and for all. But when the robot proves incompatible with the temporal field, Zim tosses a rubber pig into the vortex instead. Surprisingly, it works, causing young Dib to crash his tricycle in the past. Amused, Zim sends even more rubber pigs into Dib's childhood. One pig replaces the hover helmet Professor Membrane built, causing Dib to plummet from the sky and crash into the sewers. Another pig replaces a video camera, startling Dib and making him tumble from a jungle gym. And when an aid meant to save Dib's life is swapped with yet another pig, it crushes his bones instead of restarting his heart. Believing Dib to be dead, Zim celebrates, until Professor Membrane rebuilds Dib's shattered body with a powerful robotic suit. Now, an enraged, steel-enhanced Dib smashes his way into Zim's base, seeking revenge for his ruined childhood. Panicking, Zim frantically hurls more pigs into the time machine, desperate to find a point where Dib is still weak. But his interference only prompts Professor Membrane to make the suit even deadlier. As Dib's final punch approaches, Zim uses his last pig to send a note to his past self, warning him to never use the time machine. Everything snaps back to normal, except the piggy replaced Zim's mind instead.
For the occasion. You see, at the end of this wormhole lies...
Episode 9, A Room with a Moose and Hamstergeddon. Part 1, A Room with a Moose. Zim had a plan, a brilliant, twisted plan to finally get back at his schoolmates, especially Dib. He lured them onto a fake field trip, smirking as the bus rumbled along a road that didn't exist. Dib, ever the paranoid skeptic, quickly realized something was wrong. The driver wasn't real, but his frantic warnings were brushed off, his classmates rolling their eyes and groaning about his endless conspiracy theories. Feeling smug, Zim cornered Dib and spilled his plan. Every detail dripping with manic glee. The bus had been launched into a wormhole with 3 possible destinations: a universe of very itchy gas, a realm of pure filth, and Zim's chosen endpoint, a room with a moose. Well, now you know why the episode was titled the way it was. Anyhow, Dib scoffed, until Zim catapulted a few walnuts into the moose's chamber. As Dib watched the creature crunch them one by one, he felt an inexplicable chill settle in his spine. Panicked, Dib rushed back to the other kids, pleading with them to listen. They rewarded his efforts with laughter and a wedgie for good measure. Desperate, Dib scanned the data on his laptop, his fingers flying over the keys. The wormhole would soon fork, left to the room with the moose, right to Earth. All they had to do was shift the bus's weight. He shouted his plan to the kids. They just sneered. No one wanted to sit near him. Thinking quickly, Dib huffed and slumped onto the left side of the bus. As expected, the others scrambled to the opposite side, grumbling but obeying their social instincts. The bus tipped just enough to veer right, toward home. Back at school, his classmates whined about the trip while Dib basked in his victory. Somewhere far away, Zim threw a tantrum in his bass. Gur simply mimicked him with cheerful abandon before turning back to his cartoon.
I hate to be the bad guy, but you must be disciplined, or you'll never learn!
Part 2. Hamstergeddon. On a fateful day at school, Ms. Bitters announced with her usual disdain that the school board had demanded a new class pet, a hamster named Pee-Pee. From the moment Pee-Pee arrived, the students were captivated by its irresistible cuteness, crowding around the cage with adoration. Zim watched this spectacle with a calculating glare. If something so small and fuzzy could hold such sway over these weak-minded humans, then perhaps it could serve his schemes. Inspiration struck, and Zim secretly planted an Urkin device on Pee-Pee, one designed to make the hamster grow larger and obey his every command. However, the device malfunctioned. Rather than creating a useful minion, Pee-Pee transformed into a colossal, rampaging monster. Buildings trembled under its stomping paws, and chaos reigned as the once adorable creature tore through the city. At first, Zim reveled in the destruction, amused by the power of his unintended creation. But when Pee-Pee's path of mayhem veered toward his own home, his amusement turned to panic. Desperation replaced arrogance, and Zim grudgingly sought Dib's help. Together, they concocted a plan. Lure Pee-Pee using Zim's Voot cruiser to a Ferris wheel fitted with rockets to launch the beast into space. But when the military interfered, the plan fell apart, and Dib ended up locked away in a bucket. With no other choice, Zim improvised. He strapped rockets directly onto Pee-Pee's back and blasted the hamster skyward, a triumphant smirk on his face as his problem launched beyond the atmosphere. Unbeknownst to everyone, Pee-Pee's flight ended abruptly when it came crashing back to Earth in a distant field, where it exploded with a mighty boom.
You're too small to...
Seize the enemy!
What are you... No!
Episode 10. Plague of Babies and Bloaty's Pizza Hog. Part 1. Plague of Babies. An unexpected mechanical failure sends Zim and Gur hurtling through the sky in the damaged Voot cruiser. Zim regains control just in time to crash land safely at their headquarters. But to his horror, he realizes a human baby witnessed the entire incident. Despite Gur's attempts to reassure him, Zim decides to confront the baby to eliminate any potential threat. Disguised as a baby inspector, Zim interrogates the child, Nugums, but gets nothing useful. Worse, he's nearly overwhelmed by the unbearable stench radiating from Nugums. Frustrated, he returns to his base to assess the danger a human baby could pose. But his thoughts are interrupted by Gur, who's playing with a power amplifier, sending out such potent waves of stupidity that it briefly kills Zim before his pack reactivates him. Their argument is cut short by the doorbell. When Zim answers, no one's there, but as he turns around, he's ambushed by a horde of babies led by Nugums. They knock him out, tie him up, and reveal their true identities. The Nhag Ok, an alien race that resembles human babies. Nugums, actually Space Sergeant Schnooky, explains that 7 years ago, they mistakenly freed human infants from a hospital, believing they were their own kind held captive. When discovered by hospital workers, they were forced to replace the babies they'd tried to save, leaving them stranded on Earth ever since. Desperate to return home, Snooky and his team try to steal Zim's ship. When Zim resists, the babies merge into the monstrous Giganto baby, wreaking havoc on his base. But Zim seizes an opportunity, using Gur's amplifier to overwhelm the Nargok's senses, reverting them to their harmless forms. With his ship safe, Zim promptly launches the alien infants back to where they belong, leaving the Nargok trapped here on Earth.
Too easy. Hold on to something. I can't!
Part 2. Bloaty's Pizza Hog. As Gaz doodled around, trying to sketch a pig, her focus was repeatedly shattered by Dib's rambling about his latest genius plan to defeat Zim. He's determined to tunnel into Zim's underground base, and just as he's about to dash off, Professor Membrane announces it's their annual family dinner night. Gaz picks Bloaty's Pizza Hog. It's rare she gets any time with their work-obsessed dad, so she's genuinely looking forward to it. But Dib, of course, decides to go on his mission anyway, promising he'll be back before Mysterious Mysteries starts. Predictably, he doesn't make it. Professor Membrane refuses to leave without him, insisting that family night is for the whole family. If Dib doesn't make it back in time, the night's cancelled until next year. Frustrated but determined, Gaz postpones dinner for an hour and marches off to drag Dib back. She stomps straight into Zim's base and demands that Gur tell her where Dib went. After some chaotic rambling, Gur shows her to a teleporter. Moments later, she's on Zim's space station. Unimpressed by the fact that she's actually in space, she follows the sound of Zim's evil laughter. She finds Dib trapped in a glass tank, with Zim gloating about how Dib's now his prisoner by Urkan rules of war. For a moment, Gaz considers letting Zim have his fun, but then she remembers her dad's warning, and there's no way she's missing pizza night. So, she breaks Dib out, flooding the room and knocking Zim flat. Ignoring Dib's protests to fight Zim, she straps him to a gurney and demands to know where the escape pods are. After a brief chase, Gaz and Dib crash land at Bloaty's Pizza Hog, where Dib tries to keep whining about Zim being on the loose. But when Zim bursts into the restaurant, he's immediately terrified by the animatronics and retreats. Meanwhile, Gaz tauntingly congratulates Dib for winning and tosses a slice of pizza at him.
Shall make my victory sweeter to know that. Ow, ow!
Episode 11. Bolognius Maximus and Game Slave 2. Part 1. Bolognius Maximus. Another day at school. Another obvious sign. On break, Dib catches Zim, who isn't eating his lunch, a bologna sandwich, fries, and other cafeteria slop. He hurls a piece of bologna at him, mocking him. But instead of annoying Zim, the meat sears his skin, fusing painfully to it. As the other school kids erupt in laughter, Zim swears revenge, his eyes burning with fury. The next day, Dib barely flinches when he sits on a thumbtack left on his seat. Zim's maniacal laughter echoes through the classroom, which Dib dismisses as the alien's usual pathetic antics. Little does he know that Zim is plotting something far worse. That night, Zim watches Dib through his monitors with malicious glee. By morning, Dib realizes something's horribly wrong. Not only does he taste delicious, but neighborhood dogs swarm him, tongues lapping hungrily. Everyone at school, even Ms. Bitters, recoils from the foul stench radiating from his skin. Ordered to wash himself in the disgustingly unclean toilet, Dib takes the chance to run tests. His worst suspicion is confirmed. Zim has injected him with a foreign DNA sequence, turning him into Bologna. Furious, Dib attacks Zim, demanding a cure. But Zim just laughs, taunting him as Dib runs away. Later, Zim finds Dib besieged by dogs. The human grudgingly admits the plan was clever and offers his hand in a truce. But when Zim shakes it, the same tack pricks his palm, infecting him with the same DNA. Zim's transformation accelerates, his base even failing to recognize him. Desperate, he begs Dib for help. Their attempts to concoct a cure only worsen their condition, leaving them fully transformed into massive, grotesque sausages. Hiding from ravenous dogs in an abandoned house, Dib looks at Zim in utter annoyance and labels him a complete jerk.
But I'm a better gamer than you. I hope you like Nightmare World.
Part 2. Game Slave 2. As Gaz comes across a brand new promo for the new handheld gaming console, Game Slave 2, she becomes eager to get her hands on it, but Professor Membrane insists she take Dib to the mall with her, convinced the world is far too dangerous for a child to be out alone. Reluctantly, Gaz agrees, but Dib insists on finishing a new episode of Mysterious Mysteries first. They arrive late, and Gaz finds herself at the end of an infuriatingly long line. Desperate to get rid of her brother, Gaz convinces Dib she saw a chupacabra lurking in the underground parking lot. The mention of cryptids is all it takes. Dib eagerly dashes off to investigate. Now alone, Gaz settles into the line, her gaze locked on the counter ahead. Unfortunately, she's right in front of Higgins, an obnoxious, hyperactive boy who won't stop bragging about his so-called gaming skills. His voice drills into her brain like nails on a chalkboard. When she finally reaches the counter, the salesman informs her there's only one Game Slave 2 left, reserved for a pre-order that hasn't been picked up yet. Higgins overhears and immediately claims to be the person who pre-ordered the console, snatching it away. Furious, Gaz vows revenge and stalks Higgins all the way to his house. Meanwhile, deep in the underground parking lot, Dib realizes there's no chupacabra. Instead, he stumbles upon a colony of rat people. Escaping their unsettling hospitality, he eventually finds his way out. Back at Higgins's house, he's gleefully enjoying his new Game Slave 2 until he realizes Gaz is outside, hunting him like a shadow. She corners him and demands the console. When he refuses, she collects all the batteries in the house and threatens to flush them down the toilet. He still refuses, and Gaz follows through on her threat. In panic, Higgins rushes to a battery store but ends up on the building's roof thanks to an overworked elevator. Somehow, Gaz is already there, waiting for him. Cornered again, he finally hands over the Game Slave 2 after she nearly crashes the elevator with them both inside. Satisfied, Gaz starts playing her game, her rage melting away as the rain outside eases. As the sky lightens, Higgins still can't help himself. He claims he's the better gamer. Before Gaz can react, the elevator cable snaps, sending them both plummeting to the ground. Moments later, Dib walks past the wreckage, shaking his head in confusion, but behind him, Higgins bursts out of the rubble, somehow completely unharmed, his manic grin intact.
At last, a new perfect world for me to...
Episode 12. Halloween Spectacular of Spooky Doom. Halloween fever sweeps through town, but for Zim, the holiday is a waking nightmare. Convinced the school children have transformed into candy-crazed monsters, he barricades his base, determined to protect his precious blood, because apparently he's heard of vampires too. Meanwhile, Dib's sanity is unraveling. Plagued by grotesque hallucinations, he sees creatures no one else can. The class finally snaps and plays one of their crazy cards, sending him off to the crazy house for boys. But the truth is far worse. His father's latest invention has been glitching, teleporting Dib into a twisted, alternate dimension. The flashes keep getting longer, and Dib knows it's only a matter of time before he's trapped in the nightmare realm forever. Breaking out of the asylum, Dib stumbles to the only person who might help him, Zim, but the alien's paranoia leaves him unwilling to cooperate. Their argument turns pointless when both are yanked into the nightmare realm for good. Reluctantly teaming up, their fragile truce shatters when Dib leaves Zim to be captured by the Halloweenies. Desperate, Dib navigates a horrifying version of his own house, only to be caught by monstrous reflections of his father and Gaz. Meanwhile, Zim learns the truth from Nightmare Bitters, the ruthless leader of the Halloweenies. They plan to hijack the portal in Dib's mind to invade the real world. Zim escapes her clutches, not out of empathy, but because conquering Earth is his right, not theirs. As Nightmare Bitters activates the portal, Zim charges in with a stolen mech from Nightmare Membrane's lab. The chaotic battle buys Zim enough time to force his way through Dib's mind portal. Dib follows moments later, arriving horrifyingly inside out before twisting himself back to normal with unsettling ease. Their relief is short-lived. Nightmare Bitters forces her head through the flickering portal, only to be met by the horrifying sight of Gur, grotesquely bloated from devouring all the school children's candy. The madness of the real world terrifies her more than any nightmare. She flees, slamming the portal shut for good.
Look, Gaz, you're my witness. He is an alien. I have him on tape. I have you on tape witnessing it.
Episode 13, Mysterious Mysteries and Future Dib Part 1, Mysterious Mysteries. The famous show, Mysterious Mysteries of Strange Mystery, is tanking in ratings due to a lack of fresh content. In desperation to save it, the anchor makes a bold move, reaching out to Dib for one of his infamous paranormal files. Dib gleefully delivers a video he shot of Zim and Gur stumbling through the woods without their disguises, a bizarre glowing orb floating eerily beside them. The footage cuts off when Dib's camera tumbles to the ground, but his story more than makes up for it. According to Dib's dramatic retelling, Zim fired a laser blast at Gaz, temporarily blinding her, sparking a vicious brawl between him and Zim for control of the camera. The anchor seems impressed until Zim bursts onto the show, theatrically demanding to clear his name. In Zim's wildly skewed version, he's the helpless victim, bullied by Dib for no reason while Gaz looks on, too terrified of her brother's cruelty to get involved. The sheer absurdity of the claim makes Dib's head practically spin. Refusing to be outdone, Dib demands that Zim explain the mysterious glow in the footage, confident that Zim will slip up. But Zim's got a trump card. The show's expert is none other than Professor Membrane, who casually dismisses the glow as nothing but swamp gas. Zim seizes the moment, insisting Dib is a raving lunatic. To further drive the point home, the anchor interviews Dib's classmates. Every single one of them backs Zim up. Dib's crazy, plain and simple. But Dib digs in, declaring that all visionaries are labelled as mad before their brilliance is recognised. Desperate, Dib calls Gaz as a witness. Unfortunately, her recounting paints both him and Zim as rambling idiots before she sweeps Dib's legs out from under him, probably the real reason his camera hit the dirt. The anchor's ready to declare the case closed when a surprise witness named Stacy storms onto the set. Only, Stacy is just Gur with his features awkwardly pixelated for anonymity. His testimony? Pure nonsense about being a chubby lady hiding in bushes, a giant squirrel devouring Dib's greasy head, and flying off to battle bad guys on a distant planet. Flustered and overwhelmed, the anchor concludes that Dib and Gur are both nuts and that Zim is just crazy. Victorious, Zim hauls Gur off stage, grinning with triumph. Meanwhile, the anchor starts babbling incoherently at the camera, his sanity dangling by a thread. But when his boss reviews the footage, she's thrilled. Craziness, as it turns out, makes for excellent ratings.
I'm so weak from the fight. It's up to you.
Wow, I'm boring!
Part 2. Future Dib. Professor Membrane is set to reveal his most anticipated invention yet, the Perpetual Energy Generator, PEG. It is apparently a machine that will eliminate the world's need for fuel and end the global energy crisis. However, there's one horrifying flaw. If it malfunctions, it could trigger a shockwave that destroys all life on Earth. Dib is thrilled at the prospect of standing beside his famous father at the ceremony, while Zim sees an opportunity to use PEG's catastrophic potential to wipe out humanity. Dib rushes home to gather his things, only to find another version of himself lying in bed, a battle-worn, grim future Dib. This future self claims that Zim sabotaged PEG, causing the Earth's destruction. The explosion tore a rift in time, allowing him to travel back and deliver this warning. Present Dib, driven by his obsession to save the world, immediately believes him and follows his instructions. But when future Dib leads present Dib to a warehouse, the truth comes crashing down. Future Dib is actually a robot created by Zim, designed to manipulate Dib's heroic instincts. Zim, safe aboard his space station, gloats about his plan to use the robot to bypass security and destroy PEG. Trapped in a cage, Dib desperately searches for a way to warn his family. Meanwhile, the robot Dib convinces Gaz to come to the ceremony, but her suspicious nature keeps her on high alert. Professor Membrane, however, refuses to activate PEG without both his children present. From his cage, Dib hacks into Zim's system, gaining partial control of the robot's voice. Before he can issue a warning, Zim sends a trained monkey to interfere, resulting in a chaotic battle for vocal control. The robot's bizarre babbling only angers Gaz, who chases it through the facility before delivering a brutal beatdown. When Professor Membrane sees the crowd growing restless, he becomes furious at their lack of patience and declares them unworthy of limitless power. Gaz discovers the robot's true nature and reprograms it to be her personal minion. Zim sulks over his failed plan, but takes comfort in watching the real Dib continue to wrestle with the furious monkey, trapped and forgotten.
We don't want any government candy!
We don't want none of your government candy!
Yes, you do!
Episode 14, Door to Door, and FBI Warning of Doom. Part 1, Door to Door. Ms. Bitters is delivering another of her monotonous lectures at school. She's constructing a precarious house of cards on Dib's desk, her monotone voice dripping with disdain as she describes how society is destined to collapse under its own weight. The metaphor becomes all too real when the structure topples, obliterating Dib's desk. But with the school's desk budget utterly drained, Dib's left with a filthy, raccoon-infested trash can as a replacement. Ignoring his protests, Ms. Bitters rolls out a clunky projection screen. Suddenly, Poop Dog, the gratingly cheerful mascot of Poop Candy, bursts onto the screen with frenetic energy, pitching a school fundraiser. The prizes are ridiculous. Adhesive medical strips, a malfunctioning hovercraft, and a helmet that doesn't even withstand laser fire. But when Poop Dog mentions a secret prize, obtainable only by selling an obscene amount of candy bars, everyone's attention sharpens. Dib rolls his eyes, pointing out the absurdity of spending fundraiser money on prizes instead of desks. Zim scoffs, dismissing the cheap rewards as primitive nonsense. But the idea of a secret prize sinks its hooks into his mind. Zim's eyes gleam with obsession, convinced the prize must be a weapon of mass destruction, perfect for his world-conquering ambitions. The next day, the neighborhood descends into chaos. Swarms of school kids terrorize doorsteps, frantically pushing poop choco bars on horrified citizens. Dib, fueled by a spiteful determination to see Zim fail, outpaces everyone. Meanwhile, Zim's attempts are laughably pathetic. Everyone slams their doors in his face, except for one bewildered old lady who buys a single bar out of pity. That night, a grotesque demonic version of Poop Dog haunts Zim's dreams, sneering at his incompetence. Enraged, Zim snaps. The following day, he deploys Urkin technology, strapping virtual reality helmets onto his would-be customers. The devices thrust them into a horrifying simulation, where their refusal to buy his chocolate bars results in a bleak future as Urkin slaves. Terrified, they cave in immediately. Later on, Dib is declared the top seller. His reward, nothing more than a box of adhesive medical strips. Smugness barely settles on his face before Zim storms in, his maniacal laughter filling the room as he hurls piles of money everywhere and demands his secret prize. Ms. Bitters barely looks up as she delivers the crushing truth. The secret prize doesn't exist. It was just a marketing ploy to make Poop Dog filthy rich. For his efforts, Zim is handed a rusty can of tuna. The revelation sends Zim into a rage so powerful that his screeches shatter the newly repaired desks, and somewhere, echoing faintly in the chaos, the mocking laughter of that demonic Poop Dog lingers. Part 2, FBI Warning of Doom. Gurr was glued to the TV, watching the same movie he'd rented from the mall for what had to be the 100th time. Zim stomped into the room, about to yell at Gurr for his endless rewatching, when his eyes locked onto the screen. An FBI warning flashed in bold letters, and suddenly, all irritation melted into pure, icy fear. His mind raced with panic, only made worse when his computer chimed in, confidently declaring that the FBI was likely a secret organization dedicated to hunting down aliens. Just then, the phone rang. A call from the mall demanding the overdue DVD be returned. Zim snatched the disc from Gurr, ignoring his protests, and bolted out the door, determined to get rid of the incriminating evidence before the FBI descended upon him. Breaking into the mall after hours proved tricky. The place was guarded by Sergeant Slab Rankle, a security maniac who had rigged the building with every imaginable trap. Zim sprinted for the return slot, but got caught, snagged by one of Rankle's elaborate security devices, and thrown into a holding cell with other rule breakers. Undeterred, Zim rallied the prisoners, convincing them to stack themselves into a human staircase so he could reach the ceiling chute. Without hesitation, he climbed over their heads and escaped, leaving them behind. Once out, he navigated past cameras and found Rankle's office, reclaiming the DVD. Just as he made a break for the store, Rankle unleashed an army of zombie guards. Zim braced for a fight, but soon realized they were completely brainless, easily shoving past them to the return slot. Impressed, Rankle offered Zim joint rule over them all, but Zim just shrugged him off and headed home, glad to be free of the FBI's imaginary wrath. Episode 15, Battle of the Planets. The title of this episode is quite familiar, isn't it? Well, if it doesn't, then let me jog your memory. English version of the Gatchaman anime series. Yes, it coincides with the Battle of Planets, 1978 Sci-Fi series. Anyhow, the episode begins, driven by Zim's relentless ambition to impress the Urkan Empire. He launches probes to Mars, eager to determine if the barren planet holds any value for conquest. To his surprise, the probes return images of grand, artificial structures, remnants of a once thriving civilization. Intrigued, Zim, with Gur at his side, flies the Voot cruiser to Mars, his curiosity piqued by what could have wiped out the enigmatic Marsoids. Exploring the desolate planet, Zim discovers the face on Mars, an ancient control interface. His tinkering reveals the truth. The Marsoids had converted their entire planet into a massive spaceship. Tragically, their ambition proved fatal, yet Zim sees only opportunity. If the Marsoids could make Mars move, so could he, and if he could steer an entire planet, he could crush Earth. Excitedly, he contacts the almighty Tallest, gloating about his scheme. The Tallest, busy with the organic sweep on Planet Blanche, mockingly cheer for him. But for once, the Urkan soldiers genuinely praise his efforts, though their admiration turns to laughter once Zim ends the call. Meanwhile, Dib, always vigilant, watches the Mars probe feed from his computer. His worst fears are confirmed when he sees Mars hurtling toward Earth under Zim's control. Desperate, Dib rushes to NASA Place to alert the authorities, but they dismiss him as a nuisance. Their cameras shut off due to a lack of funding. As Dib leaves, a janitor approaches him, revealing himself as a fellow member of the Swollen Eyeball Network. The man explains that the Marsoids had also converted Mercury into a spacecraft. With his help, Dib launches an outdated rocket and heads to Mercury, determined to stop Zim's mad plan. A chaotic planetary dogfight ensues, with Zim's Mars and Dib's Mercury clashing from the Sun to Saturn. But Zim's recklessness proves his downfall. As he tries to lose Dib in the asteroid belt, he's pummeled by space debris. Dib's victory, however, is bittersweet. Gur has stolen his cameras, erasing all evidence of Zim's attack. Later, Zim calls the Tallest, boasting of his machine, their laughter echoing across space. Sadly, though, they are oblivious to the truth. Mars, uncontrolled, crashes through their armada, leaving destruction in its wake.
The human is escaping!
Episode 16, Abducted, and the Sad, Sad Tale of Chickenfoot. Part 1. Abducted. Zim was mid-rant, eagerly detailing human foolishness to the almighty Tallest when the doorbell rang, cutting through his tirade. Annoyed by the interruption, he sent Guillard to investigate and tried to resume his transmission. The connection, however, abruptly cut out, leaving him fuming. Heading upstairs to investigate, Zim found two strangers standing awkwardly in his living room, their disguises shoddy and unnatural. Their smiles were forced, their movements rigid. They introduced themselves as his new neighbours, but Zim saw through their deception immediately. Their attempt at blending in was laughable, even worse than his own attempts to pass as human. He accused them of interfering with his transmission, blaming their spaceship for the interference. Before Zim could act, the strangers tossed a sack over him, bundling Guillard up in the process. They dragged their captives to their ship, a clumsy vessel disguised as a whale. Despite his protests and thrashing, the aliens remained convinced that he was human. Even when he removed his disguise and ordered Guillard to do the same, their idiocy persisted. They discussed plans to fuse him with another human by taping a gopher to his head. Escaping proved easier than expected. The aliens' attention wandered quickly, leaving Zim free to explore the ship. He stumbled upon a blob-like alien trapped in a cage, whimpering about his failed escape attempts. The creature mentioned a ceiling duct, but Zim had no intention of helping him. Instead, he sprang up through the vent, ignoring the alien's desperate pleas. Navigating the ship's vents, Zim eventually found the escape pod room. Summoning Guillard, who arrived inexplicably covered in glitter, they launched themselves from the ship, crashing back into their front yard. The aliens made only half-hearted attempts to stop them, too distracted by their next bizarre scheme, fusing random objects to the blob creature and plotting their pursuit of an earth weasel. Back in his lair, Zim re-established contact with the almighty Tallest, reporting his encounter with a species even dumber than humans. Tallest Purple's only concern, predictably, was how tall they were. Meanwhile, across the street, Dib and Gaz watched the ship, now disguised as a giant baby, drift above their house. A beam of green light engulfed Dib, whisking him away. Gaz stared blankly at the spot where her brother had been, then shrugged and wandered back inside. Part 2. The sad, sad tale of Chickenfoot. As Dib was devouring Chinese takeout and watching mysterious mysteries, his frustration boils over as the show runs a segment on Chickenfoot, a demon beast that's clearly just a guy in a cheap chicken suit. His irritation worsens when Professor Membrane's foreign dignitaries mock him, assuming he believes in something so absurd. Fed up, Dib decides to end this nonsense for the sake of serious paranormal studies. His first stop is Chicky Licky, the restaurant where Chickenfoot was spotted. The manager, Eric, pulls him aside and hands him a dirty chicken toy, saying it's useful as a grappling hook. He also gives Dib directions to Chickenfoot's apartment. Dib reaches the rundown building, but before he can find the right apartment, a trench-coated man trailing feathers walks by. He chases him down, only to find out it's Turkey Neck, another bird-themed eccentric. After a quick explanation, Turkey Neck directs Dib to the real Chickenfoot's apartment. Inside, Dib finds Chewy Rodriguez, a disheveled man living in a cluttered, chicken-themed mess. Chewy explains he was a Chicky Licky mascot whose costume fused to his body during a microwave explosion. Dib quickly realizes the explosion only jammed the zipper, but Chewy insists he's now a chicken man, with the dirty toy being the only one missing from his collection. Dib offers to give him the toy if he goes to the hospital. There, the doctor's x-ray proves it's just a stuck costume, but when the doctor tries to unzip it, Chewy panics and flees. Dib uses the toy's grappling hook to catch the zipper, just as Mysterious Mysteries cameras arrive, ripping the costume off and exposing the truth. Dib finally feels victorious, but instead of earning credibility, the public now dismisses everything paranormal as fake. Annoyed but relieved, Dib heads home, while at Crazy Taco, an employee in a taco suit suffers a microwave mishap.
Get it back!
Episode 17, Megadooma and Fleiss. Part 1, Megadooma. On a distant storage planet, the almighty Tallest, Red and Purple, sift through equipment, deciding what to send to their invaders to aid their conquests. Red begrudgingly approves the Megadooma X3 combat stealth mech for Invader 10, who is assigned to conquer the planet Microb. Purple grumbles that he doesn't like the robot, to which Red gives a snide response. Their attention shifts to a compartment filled with malfunctioning SIR units, notorious for their deadly unpredictability. Purple gleefully suggests sending them to Zim. Red briefly considers the risk of Zim being torn apart by the malfunctioning robots, before both of them burst into hysterical laughter. On the conveyor belt planet, a screwhead named Smicka Smicka Smoodu bitterly observes the brutal labour his species endures under Urkan control. Frustrated but powerless, he makes a feeble attempt at rebellion by swapping Zim and Ten's packages. His defiance is swiftly punished with an electric shock from an Urkan slave driver. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Zim is ranting at a terrified human boy named Spuddy about a perceived wrong by Dib in class. Spuddy, utterly confused and terrified, flees home. When Zim returns to his base, a massive box crashes into his front yard, containing the Megadooma. Elated, he eagerly thanks the Tallest, only for another transmission to arrive from Ten, whose base is under siege by the deranged SIR units. Inside Zim's base, the Megadooma's packaging spills packing peanuts everywhere. Zim explains the mech's cloaking properties to Gur, who is far more fascinated by the machine's chicken legs. As Zim tries to power up the mech, he realizes it requires a wall outlet, rendering the machine's invisibility ineffective since the plug and pilot are still visible. Undeterred, Zim pilots the Megadooma through town, causing chaos as he leaves massive footprints everywhere. He laughs maniacally at the terrified humans, completely unaware that his supposed invisibility is a failure. When the machine loses power, Gur scrambles to find an outlet, plugging it into various sources, including an old folks' home, much to the residents' indifference. Eventually, the mech reaches Dib's house. Zim proudly declares his superiority, but Dib points out the obvious flaw. He can see Zim. Furious and humiliated, Zim attempts to destroy Dib with the Megadoomer's weapons, draining the city's power and deactivating the mech. Dib uses this opportunity to take photos of the Megadoomer, hoping to land himself on the cover of Crop Circle's magazine. Panicked, Zim activates the self-destruct feature and snatches the camera from Dib, proclaiming victory. They scuffle over the camera until a bird swoops down and snatches it away. Zim crows in triumph, only to be immediately crushed by a falling piece of the Megadoomer. Back on the Massive, the Tallest are informed of the Megadoomer's destruction. Purple hopes it took Zim with it, but Red doubts it. Their callousness is interrupted by another transmission from 10, screaming as the Berserk SIR units tear her base apart. Unfazed, the Tallest merely continue snacking while 10's desperate pleas echo in the background. Episode 18, Tak, the hideous new girl. It is the day of love, Valentine's, and the school buzzed with a rhythmic enthusiasm. The principal, for once, allowed the students to celebrate, but with a bizarre tradition, exchanging Valentine meat slabs. Zim recoiled at the slabs, his severe meat allergy turning the experience into a nightmare. Dib, meanwhile, received a particularly enthusiastic slab from Gretchen and couldn't help but feel intrigued by the peculiar ritual. Long ago, people exchanged cards and candy, not slabs of raw meat, but no one seemed to remember why. His inquiries met only the vague and dismissive ramblings of Ms. Bitters. Then came Tak. The new girl's arrival was as unsettling as her sleek, mechanical cat Mimi that trailed at her heels with precision. She swept through the school, handing out sausages to everyone except Zim. Instead, she recited a cryptic love poem before launching into a relentless attack involving meat. Confused and somewhat flattered, Zim interpreted her aggression as a form of affection, an opportunity to dissect the mystery of human love rituals. Yet, every attempt to manipulate the situation only resulted in humiliation, leaving him seething by the end of the day. Disgusted by the day's failures, Zim returned home, resolute in his decision to dismiss Tak as a meaningless distraction. But as he stepped through the door, he found her waiting. His attempts to dismiss her were met with dark, mocking laughter as she revealed her true identity, an Irken with a vendetta. 50 years prior, Tak had trained on the harsh world of Devastis, her ambition set on joining the Irken elite. But Zim, in his endless incompetence, had detonated a main bot to retrieve a snack from a malfunctioning vending machine, blowing up the power core for half the planet. The catastrophe left Tak trapped outside the testing chamber, her dreams shattered. For her failure to attend the test, she was exiled to planet Dirt as a janitor, her punishment to last 70 years. Escaping had been a triumph, but her vengeance drove her to Earth, determined to seize the mission she believed should have been hers. Her plan was simple: convert Earth's molten core into a storage unit brimming with snacks to impress the Tallest. With a swarm of nanobots unleashed to cripple Zim's base, she vanished under the cover of a cloaking device, leaving chaos in her wake. Desperate and cornered, Zim reluctantly forged an alliance with Gaz and Dib. While Dib raced to shut down the magma pump Tak had activated, Zim drew her away with a chaotic chase through the sky. Meanwhile, could they be the body in water who wreak their own havoc, tampering with Mimi's memory disk to sabotage Tak's plans? Despite her meticulous preparation, Tak was eventually forced to retreat in a battered escape pod, her scheme in ruins. But the sense of victory was brief when he contacted the Tallest to boast of his success. They were unimpressed, preferring the prospect of endless snacks to Zim's ongoing failure. His gloating dissolved into frantic backpedaling, his victory hollow. Later that night, Dib sat on the rooftop, his gaze fixed on the stars, wondering if humanity would ever truly reach the mysteries beyond the sky. Gaz, ever indifferent, wandered back inside, but before Dib could follow, a flash of light and a deafening crash erupted from the lawn. Cautiously approaching the smoking crater, Dib's eyes widened with exhilaration as he found Tak's abandoned ship lying scorched in the dirt, and he smiled, his curiosity burning brighter than ever. Episode 19, Dib's Wonderful Life of Doom, and Gur Goes Crazy and Stuff. Part 1. Dib's Wonderful Life of Doom. It started with the cafeteria food, another dismal lunch hour at school, another tantrum from Zim. He was on his feet, shouting about the revolting human cuisine like it was some personal affront, his fists clenched, eyes wild, voice cracking with rage. Dib had had enough of Zim's endless rants, his bizarre antics, and his utter lack of consequence. So, with uncharacteristic spontaneity, Dib picked up the closest thing within reach, a muffin, and hurled it straight at Zim's head. It hit with a satisfying thump, crumbs bursting everywhere. Zim sputtered, his face twisted in rage and humiliation before he fled from the lunchroom. That night, strange figures visited Dib in his dreams. Mikrob, beings of luminous energy and power, whispered promises of greatness. Before he could even comprehend it, they granted him abilities beyond imagination and lulled him back to sleep. Morning came, and Dib awoke buzzing with excitement. By the time he confronted Zim at school, it was no contest. Zim's alien tricks were laughably easy to thwart. For the first time, Dib tasted real victory. The days that followed were a blur of triumph. His abilities allowed him to prove every conspiracy he'd obsessed over. Ghosts? Real lake monsters? Absolutely. The world finally listened. And when the Urken fleet arrived to annihilate Earth, Dib was the hero who saved it all. But then the interviews started, the endless questions. It was during one of them, with a reporter named Alan, that the truth came crashing down. The entire journey had been a trap, a virtual reality scheme crafted by Zim to uncover who dared throw the muffin at him. Defeated, Dib left the interview set. His victory turned to ash. But Zim wasn't done. A cannon blocked his exit, and before Dib could react, it fired a single, vengeful muffin at his head. The final insult. Part 2. Gur Goes Crazy and Stuff. Frustrated by Gur's endless malfunctions and chaotic antics, Zim decides he's had enough. To finally make his robot servant useful, he cranks Gur's behavioral modifier to a dangerously high level, permanently locking him in duty mode. To Zim's delight, the adjustment works, though he has no idea how badly this will backfire. Eager to test Gur's newfound efficiency, Zim orders him to investigate a police siren. Instead of simply gathering information, Gur goes berserk, ripping a police car from the street and hurling it through the wall of Zim's base, with the cop still tangled in his seatbelt. Worse, the cop, who turns out to be someone's father, Mary's apparently, sees Zim and Gur without their disguises. Panicked, Zim replaces the cop's brain with the squid's to erase his memory and maintain their cover. But the procedure only makes things worse. The cop wakes up as Squidman, furious about being human and longing to return to the sea. Meanwhile, Gur's boosted intelligence leads him to question Zim's authority. Begrudgingly, Gur follows Zim's orders to monitor Earth broadcasts, but his patience wears thin. Deciding he's being underutilized, Gur storms off to the library to gather more knowledge. As Zim tries to convince Squidman he's in a hospital, a frantic radio transmission reveals that Gur is draining the brains of citizens. Zim rushes to the library, dragging Squidman along. Inside, Gur is out of control, obsessed with amassing knowledge and ignoring Zim's desperate commands. In a final chaotic chase, Squidman somehow manages to squirt ink into Gur's eyes, buying Zim enough time to reset his robot back to normal. Relieved, Zim and Gur begrudgingly grant Squidman's wish, taking him to the sea, where he's promptly eaten by a shark, as Gur cheerfully observes. Episode 20, Hobo 13 and Walk for Your Lives. Part 1. Hobo 13. Tired of Zim's endless demands for advanced combat equipment, the tallest remind him, with thinly veiled irritation, that he's an invader, not a soldier. His role, they emphasize, doesn't require battle training, but Zim, stubborn as ever, insists he can handle anything thrown his way. With a smirk and a shared glance, the tallest devise a cruel solution. If Zim wants to prove himself worthy, he must survive Hobo 13, an elite training facility infamous for leaving most recruits limbless and traumatized. Against all logic, Zim eagerly accepts the challenge. To amuse themselves, the tallest take bets on his survival, coercing a low-ranking service drone named Bob to wager a hefty 500,000 monies on Zim's success, fully expecting him to lose. On Hobo 13, Zim joins a motley crew of trainees, including Scudge, whose own reward from the tallest dangles just out of reach alongside the eternally groaning Throbbulus. defibrillator, and a glimmering crystalline alien. Their instructor, the grizzled and perpetually irritated Sergeant Hobo 678, explains their brutal trials, a series of challenges meant to weed out the weak. Failure earns a one-way trip to the holding pen of pain. Naturally, Zim elects himself as leader before anyone else can even open their mouths. His leadership style proves predictably disastrous. He exploits his teammates at every turn, most notably during a canyon crossing test where he kicks Scudge straight into the jaws of the carnivorous Hogulus just to buy himself time. When called out by the sergeant, Zim resorts to siphoning energy from a teammate's suit to try and defeat the beast, giving up only when the process proves too slow. Yet, despite his recklessness, Zim's tenacity and twisted creativity carry him through each challenge. When he reaches the Fortress of Pain, he smashes through the entrance using his last remaining teammate as a battering ram. The sergeant, equal parts appalled and begrudgingly impressed, offers Zim one final test, a duel. Though the sergeant starts off strong, Zim turns the tide by draining power from his opponent's suit, securing victory. The tallest rewards Zim with his own ship, though the controls are locked, hurtling him and a bound and gagged Bob toward the sun. Somehow, they both manage to survive. Part 2. Walk for your lives. On probing day, the Urken invaders prepare for inspection by the almighty tallest. Those who fail to impress face a brutal punishment. Determined to pass, Zim eagerly calls in, showcasing his latest victory. Dib, captured and suspended within a variable time stasis field. The field, capable of speeding up or slowing down time, keeps Dib frozen mid-snoop. Unfortunately, as Zim brags to the tallest, the device malfunctions and detonates, reducing the lab to rubble. Amid the chaos, Zim and Gur begin clearing debris when Zim notices something peculiar. A glowing green fireball, small yet steadily expanding. Horrified, Zim realizes it's a city-destroying explosion. Its speed slowed dramatically by the stasis field. Despite the delay, it's growing and will eventually engulf the entire city. Desperate to contain it, Zim attempts to drown the fireball in the city's cesspool, but it slips from his grasp and lands elsewhere, continuing to swell. Panic sets in as he envisions the tallest's wrath, but his worries are interrupted by Gur, who reveals that Dib wasn't vaporized as Zim assumed. Instead, the explosion's time-altering effects have slowed Dib as well. An idea strikes Zim. If Dib caused the slowdown, then launching him into the fireball might reverse the effect, restoring the explosion to normal speed. Even Gur doubts the logic. Still, Zim sets out to retrieve Dib, who is painstakingly inching across a street to alert a nearby cop. Zim swoops in and hauls Dib back to his base, ignoring objections from Gur, Dib, and even his own computer. Zim's plan? Use a massive catapult to hurl Dib at the fireball. To everyone's shock, the plan works. The explosion rapidly accelerates, obliterating Zim's base, leveling the city and scorching everything in its path. As smoke rises from the ruins, Dib passes out, leaving Zim triumphant, if slightly singed. Season 2, 2006. Episode 21, Backseat Drivers from Beyond the Stars. A new season opens after a long time, and Zim's brand new plan to conquer Earth is almost complete. He eagerly contacts the almighty tallest, insisting they witness his glorious victory firsthand since the massive is conveniently nearby. The tallest, however, couldn't care less and brushed him off with a pathetic excuse about being under attack by an enemy vessel before promptly hanging up. Unfazed, Zim carries on with his plan, unleashing a monstrous brain-eating parasite that devours human brains. He leaves Gur in charge of monitoring its levels to prevent an early escape. He's determined the tallest will have front-row seats to humanity's end. Meanwhile, Dib excitedly tells Gaz that he's managed to get Tak's ship working in their garage. He's also hacked the onboard computer to decipher Urken text and admits to planting a spy bug in Zim's base. Gaz barely restrains herself from punching him. Using his new setup, Dib listens in as Zim contacts prisoner 777 on Vought, requesting schematics and a command chair to the Massive, allowing him to remotely pilot the ship and drag the tallest to Earth. However, the tallest have problems of their own, a resistance group called the Resisti, led by Captain Lardnar. Just as the Massive's laser prepares to obliterate the Resisti ship, Zim hijacks the controls, causing the beam to miss. The Resisti take advantage of the chaos, pursuing the now helpless Massive. Back on Earth, Dib hacks into Zim's system and starts steering the Massive in the opposite direction. Zim and Dib's fight for control of the ship leaves the tallest being thrown around like ragdolls while the Resisti continues its assault. In the midst of the chaos, Zim's computer warns him that the brain parasite's levels are critically high. Annoyed, Zim rushes to check on Gur, only to find him lying in a pile of mashed potatoes. After snapping Gur back to work, the computer alerts him to someone at the door. Zim dismisses it as minor and orders the robo-parents to handle it, but they malfunction and start playing catch with the neighbor's kid. By the time Zim arrives, the entire neighborhood is staring as Robo-Dad attempts to eat the terrified child. Panicking, Zim tosses the kid back to his parents and drags his dysfunctional robots inside. He seals the door and rushes back to the control room, where Gur and Dib are still fighting over the Massive. Realizing that Dib is using Tak's ship, Zim activates the security protocol, causing Tak's AI to lock Dib out and start attacking him. Up in space, Red figures out that Zim's control link is through the ship's power core. He orders the pilots to swap power cores with the Resisti ship, sending the Resisti hurtling toward Earth. Lardnar initiates the ship's self-destruct and evacuates, vowing revenge. Back on Earth, Zim tries to land the Massive on Dib's head. Dib panics at first, but the ship shrinks to the size of an ant and explodes. Zim freaks out, convinced his leaders are dead, but his panic is interrupted by Dib's triumphant laughter and by the brain parasite awakening and latching onto his head. Once the Massive systems come back online, the tallest calls Zim to scold him, but the screen shows Zim running around in agony with the parasite attached. Gur is eating mashed potatoes, and Robomom is taking photos of Robo-Dad, proudly holding the now traumatized neighbor kid. Horrified, Purple excuses himself to vomit on the donuts, while Red glares in disgust.
I show you power!
Episode 22, Mortos der Soul Stealer and Zim Eats Waffles, Part 1. Mortos der Soul Stealer. Every 1,000 years, when the planets Taula and Chargunga align, the powerful and mystical being Mortos der Soul Stealer rises from the underworld. This time, his arrival brings him to an abandoned graveyard, but Dib is already there, waiting. Dib knows the law. Mortos must grant one mortal a wish before he can return to the underworld, and Dib's wish to steal Zim's soul. But there's a problem. Mortos is exhausted from his journey, so Dib has to help him recharge. This means running around town, buying Mortos food from Macmeaties, and even rubber pants, until Mortos ditches him. Furious, Dib searches for Mortos and stumbles upon Zim and Gur wandering the city, tossing mutated mice into people's houses like it's some twisted prank. Dib taunts Zim, boasting about his new secret weapon, except Mortos is nowhere to be found, and Zim mocks him before launching a sandwich at Dib's face. Dib eventually finds Mortos at a carnival, where the Soul Stealer spins a sad tale about why he abandoned Dib. Annoyed and exhausted, Dib calls him a mooch. Insulted, Mortos makes the carnival rides come to life, battling each other to prove his power. Dib's faith is temporarily restored, but before Dib can even celebrate, Mortos' power drains again. Desperate, Dib drags Mortos to a pet store, but the owner chases them out and calls the cops. They spot Zim and Gur outside, but Mortos gets distracted by a soda fountain. While Dib tackles Zim, Mortos finishes his drink and regains his power. But then, Darkone strolls by and wishes for ice cream. Oblivious to Dib's plans, Mortos grants the wish, his powers spent. Dib watches in horror as Mortos fades back to the underworld, leaving him empty-handed. And to top it all off, the ice cream tastes like raisins. Moments later, the cops arrive, arresting Dib for loitering at the pet store. Zim and Gur simply stroll away, chuckling at the chaos.
Oh man! Security! Protect your master!
Part 2. Zim Eats Waffles. Dib adjusted his active camouflage device, creeping past the lawn gnome sentries, guarding Zim's house. His plan was simple: sneak in and plant a spy camera to catch Zim plotting his next evil scheme. Just as he reached the door, however, Gur burst out, sloshing his drink all over Dib. The liquid short-circuited the device, leaving Dib exposed. Thinking quickly, Dib played to Gur's naive nature and asked him to place the camera inside. To his surprise, Gur happily agreed, wandering off to do just that. Back in his room, Dib eagerly set up the camera feed on his computer. Despite the chaos of repairing several computer drives, he managed to link the feed just as Zim appeared on screen, announcing his intention to unveil his next evil plan. Dib immediately called Agent Darkbooty from the Swollen Eyeball network, but to his growing frustration, Zim and Gur simply ate breakfast. Agent Darkbooty hung up, grumbling about how jokes had no place in their organization. Dib could only stare helplessly as Gur served Zim an enormous plate of waffles. Initially resistant, Zim eventually caved under Gur's tantrum and took a bite, shocked to find them edible. Deciding to build a tolerance for earth food, he continued eating. Suddenly, chaos erupted. One of Zim's experiments, a horrifying, flesh-eating demon squid, escaped and attacked. Security systems activated, lasers firing wildly, while robo-parents and robots alike tried and failed to subdue the creature. Dib frantically called another agent, but by the time Agent Nessie answered, all she saw was Gur calmly eating waffles. She hung up, unimpressed. Zim, now battered and bruised, limped back on screen. Seemingly unbothered by the carnage, he ordered Gur to bring in Nick, his human test subject. Alarmed, Dib called the FBI, convincing them to intervene, and sent a pizza delivery to Zim's house to buy time. But Gur kept feeding both Zim and Nick endless waffles, now tainted with peanuts and soap. As Zim prepared to test his plan on Nick, the demon squid returned, now commanding an army of cyborg zombie soldiers. The FBI arrived just in time to get caught up in the carnage, but it was Zim, armed with a plunger, who finally defeated the mutant squid and its minions. Just as Dib thought he had something to record, the soldiers burst into his room and smashed his computer drives. In the aftermath, as Zim struggled to remember his plan and vomited waffles into a bucket, Dib sat in defeat. Staring at the wreckage of his equipment, he let out a short scream before rolling into bed with a tired, resigned sigh.
Attention! If I can get up there, I can expose him on national TV!
Episode 23, The Girl Who Cried, Gnome and Dibship Rising. Part 1, The Girl Who Cried Gnome. Mufi happily scampered from block to block, a bright pink sash crossing her chest, and a box of girly Rangers cookies clutched in her hands. Her high ponytail bobbed with each step as she approached a quaint little house, her smile unwavering. She knocked on the door and offered the man inside some cookies. When he declined, her face twisted as if possessed. After a sudden, violent convulsion, she shoved the box into his hands, forcing him to buy it. Victorious, she turned her gaze to the next house, Zim's. Inside his dimly lit lair, Zim was absorbed in his latest bizarre experiment when his computer's alarm blared, warning him of the approaching Cookie Scout. Panicked and overreacting, he deployed a robot gopher. The mechanical creature burst from the ground beneath Mufi's feet, sending her sprawling into a hole. Zim's satisfaction was short-lived. The gopher malfunctioned, breaking into a chaotic dance before launching itself into the sky. A blonde woman, witnessing the scene, immediately contacted the media, which swarmed the area within moments. Zim, overwhelmed by the sudden attention, scrambled to make his house appear more ordinary by scattering clumsy artificial earth rocks around his yard. His efforts only seemed to make the situation worse, especially when Mufi began throwing dirt at rescue workers attempting to free her. Frustrated and unsuccessful, the rescue team called for President Man's intervention. Nearby, Dib pushed through the crowd, assessing the situation with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. He realized the attention was only feeding Mufi's stubbornness. Unfortunately, his attempt to move closer was interrupted by the arrival of 4 girly Rangers demanding cookie purchases. With no money to offer, Dib attempted to trade a slice of ham, resulting in a vicious attack from the Cookie Scouts. Meanwhile, Mufi's latest ear-splitting scream echoed so loudly that it was heard across the universe, causing disruption even among the Irken Armada's ships. As President Man arrived and announced his intention to rescue Mufi, Zim, desperate to appear helpful, proposed a ridiculous plan to shake the entire Earth and dislodge her. His real intention, however, was to flee the planet before its destruction. Dib, still battered from his cookie-based altercation, managed to catch President Man's attention by offering a more sensible solution, using a digging machine. Inside his base, Zim ranted about leaving Earth forever, his frustration mounting as he watched the rescue attempt unfold. Driven by pure anger, he stormed outside and dragged Mufi from the hole with a sudden burst of strength. The crowd erupted into cheers at her rescue. Mufi bounced away, seemingly unaffected by the chaos. Dib's efforts to expose Zim's suspicious behavior were ignored by the dispersing crowd. In the midst of the commotion, he stumbled and fell into the same hole Mufi had been trapped in. Zim, savoring his victory, sent out another robot gopher to dance mockingly in front of Dib, its mechanical twirls adding insult to injury. Hours later, Dib's pleas for help went unanswered. The gopher continued its relentless dance as Zim enjoyed his bizarre triumph.
I am!
No! Listen to Zim! Hear me!
Part 2. Dib Ship Rising. Dib was more resolute than ever to affix Tak's ship, but ever since Zim reactivated the ship's AI, complete with Tak's downloaded personality, repairs had become nearly impossible. Armed with nothing but a broken light pole, Dib fended off the ship's relentless attacks and managed to temporarily shut it down. While the modified Spittle Runner was under his control, Dib replaced Tak's personality with a copy of his own consciousness. Finally, he had the spaceship he'd always dreamed of, but the new programming worked a little too well. Now, the ship genuinely believed it was Dib, and that the real Dib was nothing more than a fake sent by Zim. That night, the Dib ship destroyed his alarm clock and even went to school in his place, reshaping itself to resemble the boy it now believed itself to be. Zim quickly recognized the Dib ship as Tak's technology and seized control of it. Perched triumphantly on top, he commanded the ship to capture Dib and haul him off to the city cesspool. As the ship sped toward Dib's watery grave, Dib and Zim bickered and shouted over each other, each trying to convince the ship of their own truth. Just as Dib was about to plummet to his grim fate, the ship's programming hesitated. It remembered it had Dib's consciousness and tossed Zim aside. But then, it realized something else. Dib's life was filled with horrible knowledge. Deciding it wanted nothing to do with such a miserable existence, the ship purged his personality from its programming entirely.
Enough! Where are my weapons?
What weapons?
The super weapons you promised me!
Episode 24, Vindicated, and The Voting of the Doomed. Part 1, Vindicated. One chaotic afternoon in gym class, Dib and Zim find themselves locked in a vicious game of bludgeon ball, a twisted version of dodgeball designed more for pain than sport. The match is already a frenzy of flying balls and shouted threats when one of Zim's contact lenses falls out, revealing his unnatural alien eye. The school children freeze, eyes glued to the bizarre sight, but Zim, ever the master of absurd excuses, dismisses the horror with the claim of having pink eye, a perfectly ordinary human illness. Dib's frustration erupts with a fury unmatched. The sheer absurdity of everyone believing Zim's flimsy cover story pushes him past his breaking point. His voice cracks as he rants about Zim's true identity, his gestures wild and desperate. But his outburst only earns him the disdain of Coach Walrus, a creature of muscle and gristle, with no patience for Dib's hysterics. He's sent off to Mr. Dwicky, the newly appointed guidance counsellor, whose predecessor was apparently removed under mysterious circumstances. In Mr. Dwicky's cluttered office, Dib spills everything. He rants about Zim, the constant attempts at world domination, the terrifying incompetence of everyone around him, and, surprisingly, Mr. Dwicky listens. More than that, he believes Dib even offers to help. After school, they gather at Dib's house to plot. Using stolen alien identification schematics from Zim's computer, they send a transmission to Zim's base, posing as Plakesians who've crash-landed on Earth. Their voices are distorted beyond recognition. Their message simple: if Zim helps repair their ship, they will reward him with super weapons. The bait is set, the meeting point established deep within the woods. Cameras are hidden strategically among the trees, the scene painstakingly prepared for Zim's inevitable arrival, but the hours crawl by with no sign of him. The anticipation twists into frustration, then doubt. Mr. Dwicky's patience wears thin, his enthusiasm fading as he questions the legitimacy of the entire scheme. Dib's heart sinks as he realizes his supposed ally never truly believed him. Just as Dib's hope teeters on the edge of despair, Zim arrives. The alien's arrival is abrupt, his demeanor as smug and oblivious as ever. But before Dib can prove his point, two actual Plukesians, Mushi and Spoopty, emerge from the darkness. Drawn by the signal Dib and Mr. Dwicky had unwittingly broadcasted, they approach with a genuine curiosity. Zim immediately demands the superweapons, still oblivious to the fact that Dib had intended to trick him. To Dib's utter dismay, the Plukesians readily comply, handing over advanced weaponry without hesitation. Worse, they invite Mr. Dwicky to join them on an intergalactic journey, an offer the stunned counselor accepts without a second thought. Dib watches, helpless and horrified, as Mr. Dwicky departs with the Plukesians, taking the only proof of Zim's identity, the video camera, with him. His carefully orchestrated plan crumbles to nothing, leaving him stranded without evidence or allies. Meanwhile, Zim strides home triumphantly, clutching his new arsenal of superweapons, blissfully unaware of Dib's elaborate scheme. Part 2. The Voting of the Doomed. One day, the school president has a spectacularly intense meltdown from not showing enough school spirit, and a new election is called. Zim leaps at the opportunity for power, announcing his candidacy with enthusiasm so intense, even Gaz throws her reluctant support behind him. Though the system labels him as a moron, it also somehow deems him suitable for the role. Dib, of course, objects, loudly, but the staff dismiss him as annoying and refuse to listen. Instead, Willie, a hopelessly clueless schoolchild, is pushed forward as the only other candidate. The analysis deems him leadership material, though nobody quite understands why. The first debate is a chaotic spectacle. Zim wins by promising the school children increasingly absurd things, like free jetpacks and candy fountains, while Willie only mumbles nonsensically into the microphone. Realizing the severity of the situation, Dib decides to help Earth the only way he can, by becoming Willie's campaign manager. During the final debate, Dib feeds Willie lines through a communicator, turning his incoherent ramblings into polished speeches that somehow resonate with the audience. The votes are counted, and Willie is declared the new school president. But Zim ends up having the last laugh. The school principal and the board immediately brainwash Willie, turning him into their puppet, an unfortunate fate Zim now avoids, all thanks to Dib's efforts.
Normal head and chew on your eyeballs after I pluck them out.
Episode 25. Gaz, Taster of Pork. Dib couldn't believe his luck. His favourite show, Mysterious Mysteries, was doing a special on spell drives, ancient electronic books infused with magic. To his delight, and the host's annoyance, Dib was featured as the leading collector of these mystical artifacts. Riding high from the spotlight, he remembered he still had unused cast points on one of his spell drives. Excited to test out a new spell, he decided to try it on his sister, Gaz, just to see if it was worth using on himself. Unfortunately, the spell made everything Gaz ate taste like pig. Furious and disgusted, she quickly figured out who was behind it and threatened to unleash an army of flesh-eating robotic toys on Dib if he didn't fix it. Panicked, Dib scrambled for a solution. He even approached their father, Professor Membrane, but the scientist just locked Gaz in a cage and paraded her as a freakish anomaly for the media. Desperate, Dib turned to Zim, hoping the alien's knowledge might help. Zim just mocked him and gleefully launched into some evil scheme, which Dib ignored before leaving. Out of ideas, Dib finally consulted the Swollen Eyeball Network. Their verdict? There was only one way to break the curse. Gaz would have to travel to an alternate piggy dimension and appeal to the Shadow Hog to restore her taste. After breaking Gaz out of her cage, Dib guided her to Mystical Hill and used a spell drive to open a portal to the Shadow Hog's realm. The Shadow Hog agreed to lift the curse if Gaz could pass the trial. Gaz didn't hesitate, but Dib grew anxious, knowing his sister's lack of paranormal knowledge. Inside the trial arena, however, the Shadow Hog just asked Gaz two simple questions. She answered them correctly, and they spent the rest of the time chatting. Meanwhile, Dib was outside trying to break in, convinced she was in danger, and getting repeatedly pummeled for his efforts. When Dib finally burst in, he assumed Gaz had failed and threw himself at the Shadow Hog's mercy, admitting it was all his fault. Amused, the Shadow Hog agreed to Dib's plea, sending Gaz home and leaving Dib behind to clean his toilets. With his head, some lessons are hard learned.
Since my mighty robot has already contacted the tallest and arranged for my rescue.
Episode 26, The Fry Cook What Came From All That Space. The episode opens with Dib's latest attempt to expose Zim as an alien during class ends in another disaster. His classmates respond with mocking laughter as Punchy points out that a bird has left a gross present on Dib's jacket. Before he can recover from the humiliation, chaos erupts. A mysterious figure crashes through the ceiling, grabs Zim, and takes off into space. Desperate to make sense of what just happened, Dib yells at his classmates about proof of alien life. They only roll their eyes. Zim finds himself aboard his captor's ship, facing Sizzlaw, a grizzled, bitter man who once employed him at a filthy fast food joint during Zim's banishment to Food Courtier. Zim ran away to chase his so-called grand mission, leaving Sizzlaw to handle the grueling work alone for what felt like 20 years during the infamous Great Foodening. Now, Sizzlaw wants revenge. Zim desperately tries to contact Gur, ordering him to call the tallest for help, but Gur, in classic fashion, bolts outside to fly a monkey-shaped kite instead. Sizzlaw, meanwhile, shows Zim his punishment, scrubbing down booth 12, home to a carnivorous beast, and if Zim tries to leave the restaurant, a security system synced to his biosignature will make him explode. Adding to the nightmare, the next foodening starts in a week, which means being trapped for 20 years. Back on Earth, Dib shows up at Zim's house, demanding answers from Gur, who accidentally calls the tallest in front of Dib. Meanwhile, Zim spends his days forced into greasy, demeaning tasks, including entertaining customers in a boiling hot, grease-filled suit. One day, while talking to a regular named Eric, Zim learns the security system has a fatal flaw. It can't detect prisoners if they hide in something thick enough, like a garbage can. Inspired, Zim hatches a plan. The next day, he hides in Eric's meal. When Eric eats, Zim slips past the security system into the man's stomach, but the escape triggers Sizzlaw's alarms. After a chaotic chase, Zim barely escapes in a cab as the next foodening begins, trapping Sizzlaw all over again. Zim's cab crash lands back on Earth, drawing the attention of two neighbours who shrug off the explosion like it's just another Tuesday. Relieved to be home, Zim storms inside, only to find Dib and Gur dancing in front of the tallest on his living room screen. As Zim chases Dib around the house, the tallest casually turn off the connection, leaving chaos in their wake. Episode 27, The Most Horrible Christmas Ever. 2 million years in the future, a robotic snowman named Mr. Sludgy entertains a group of wide-eyed children with the chilling tale of the most horrible Christmas ever. The story begins with Zim, Gur and Minimus desperately trying to make money on the bustling city streets, but their only rewards are a beating heart and a tuna sandwich. Frustrated, Zim notices that men dressed in red coats and white beards are stealing all his money. Determined to get to the bottom of this, he captures one of the Santas and interrogates him, soon discovering the legend of Santa Claus. Amazed by the power Santa holds over humans, Zim hatches a brilliant plan to masquerade as Santa using a high-tech suit capable of mimicking the jolly old man. With humanity under his sway, Zim sets up shop at the North Pole, convincing everyone to help him build a massive teleporter to send the human race to the tallest for enslavement. Dib, however, isn't fooled. Despite everyone's devotion to Santa, he tries to expose Zim's plot, only to be tossed into Jingle Jail. Undeterred, Dib escapes and disguises himself as one of Zim's robot elves, learning firsthand that Zim's Santa suit has a major flaw. It actually thinks it is Santa. The suit begins to overpower Zim's will, especially when exposed to Christmas cheer, something Gur eagerly provides with a few cheerful carols. Dib attempts to use this distraction to his advantage, but ends up getting caught and thrown from Zim's ship. Left stranded on a sinking ice chunk, he desperately calls Gaz for help. She's furious at him for destroying her beloved Bitey the vampire doll, but eventually shows up to rescue him, albeit with plenty of violence along the way. Armed with his father's anti-Santa arsenal, Dib returns to the North Pole for one final showdown. But by then, the suit has completely taken over Zim, mutating into a monstrous version of Santa hell-bent on destruction. After an epic battle, Dib manages to free Zim from the suit, launching the mutated Santa monster into space. Later, Mr. Sludgy explains to the children that Santa isn't truly gone. Instead, he's out there, gathering strength to attack Earth every Christmas, a threat they must stay protected from under their dome. And with that, we have reached the very end of the show. Of course, not counting the uncompleted ones. Anyhow, even with getting cancelled midway, Invader Zim 2001 to 2006 is one of those shows that just refuses to fade away. When it first hit the screens on Nickelodeon, it was totally unique for the network, a dark, twisted, and super funny sci-fi series that boldly blended unsettling humour with themes of alien invasion and satire on society. There were definitely mixed feelings among the critics. Some praised its boldness and unique aesthetic, while others found it too disturbing and nihilistic for a channel known for children's cartoons like SpongeBob SquarePants. But the fan base? That was a whole different situation. Fans of Invader Zim have always been, and continue to be, incredibly passionate. So, whether you see it as pure genius or just a delightful chaos, there's no arguing that Invader Zim made a strange, gooey green in the early 20s animated scene. In the end, the show's legacy really took off with the 2019 Netflix movie Invader Zim: Enter the Florpus, which fans had been eagerly awaiting for as a continuation. If you have liked our efforts so far in bringing you this content, do like the video and subscribe to our channel.